So then, we are back with the more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then, we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yirmiyahu the prophet, the 61st chapter gives us sections of the spring feast found in Leviticus the 23rd chapter, and also the autumn feast related from the same chapter. Let's then make an analysis of what's going on in the world, as then the last video explained then very precisely the importance of studying the teachings of the Messiah and Shaliach Shaul, because he taught mostly in Asia Minor, and then the Asia in the Pacific became the very important place for 1,000 years. Interestingly, the enemy then, when he saw the situation as far as Asia Minor and the Pacific, during his time of the 1,000 years of deceit, he then shifted from Asia and the Pacific towards the west, became the Atlantic. So let's then make sure we understand, as far as we can read and study, you find then the Pacific is then the first place and the Atlantic the second. We are so indoctrinated in the Atlantic discoveries for so long because of the countries involved in this part of the world. You find not only this, but the 1,000 years of deceit then subdivided in a couple of sections. You find then in Revelation the facet of the beast as then deceit, 800 years granted to Great Britain, and a couple of 100 years granted to America, United States, completing then the 1,000 years, both of them mostly involved with the Atlantic. As time went on, you can read by yourself Daniel the 12th chapter, explaining then obviously the ending of the 1,000 years of deceit, and then a high peak of knowledge at the end of this period. Interestingly enough, we understand Asia holds more than 50% of the trade of the world, and the West is mostly bankrupt. So then, it gives us a very interesting point, because we are then testifying with our very eyes the importance of the sons of Ibrahim, the Arab nations, the sons of Ishmael, the first son. And then we find the prophecy of Yirmiyahu extremely important, found in the 23rd chapter of this great prophet. Let's read then a section of the 23rd chapter, and then the 9th verse, explaining then the crowning. However, the word crowning does not exist, because crown is from Western type of item. As related with the merchants of the first son, we should be reading turbans. The turbans then is a symbol of authority, and then the restoration, because then the merchants, the first merchants, were the Ishmaelites, the sons of Ishmael, and then whose traders, whose opinion, whose viewpoint, input regarding trade is very weighty or very important. So this shows us then the sons of Ishmael returning to their own authority, rescuing what they've learned from Ibrahim, and understanding the importance of royalty. So then, There is a link with chapter the 23rd chapter and the 62nd chapter of Yirmiyahu the prophet. Then explains the restoration of the beauty of the authority of the sons of Ishmael. So then, what is the link of this section and China of the 11th chapter of Daniel? Somewhat simple. However, let's then re-establish the ways of the Asians, the Pacific, and the sons of Ishmael, being then the very first steps of the learning of the kingdom to come government. What was the objective of Shaliach Shaul? He was explaining the completion of the spring feast, preparing the people for the autumn feast also. And then, as they were learning how then the kingdom to come would act as traders. How is it going to be conducted trade when the new kingdom comes? So, Shaliach Shaul taught them. And the principles were in Daniel. So then, later on, it was these then for 1,000 years, and then came the time of deceit. So the enemy shifted the whole situation. He had taken the other side of the world, and he teach it in his own ways of doing trade, based on cheating, lying, and so on and so forth. That's why the West is mostly bankrupt, because they are liars and cheaters. So then, because of these, we are then relearning the importance of the Arab nations receiving their authority as traders, or those people from the lineage of trade, Ishmael. We find prophecies of Yirmiyahu, the 23rd, the 62nd. You'll find then the 37th chapter of Ezekiel. You also find the stick of authority of the first son. How then China plays along with it? Well, we are obviously reading the news, and we know China by itself already has 57% of the world's trade, and it's from an area of Asia. Combining with other rich countries of Asia, we can understand why then Shaliach Shaul taught in Asia Minor. There is a link with it. During the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, there was a shift to the west, because the enemy didn't like Asian kind of trade and the teachings of Shaliach Shaul, did he? No, he decided to come up with his own religion towards the west, and then a western understanding of discoveries, where you find, for instance, America that was then discovered by Christopher Columbus, only because he was from a false teaching of religion was granted with discovery. But we understand those who were from Polynesia were already very active during the time when Asia then dominated the world. And as we know today, not very many people can understand and read regarding the Pacific and the great voyages of the Polynesians, Micronesians, and those people from those islands of the Pacific. They were extremely knowledgeable of navigating up and down, south and north and west and east. So then, because of these, let's then understand another topic. A very short while ago, roughly 24 hours, 48 hours, Bitcoin is yet showing itself very strong. In many companies in the United States, they are already adopting this monetary system, extremely valuable, and using for purchasing of plane tickets, and then renting of hotels and cars and so on and so forth. So you can imagine the importance of this system, because as the governments are being placed aside, let's understand, from the time of the Restoration on, nations of the world with the standard government, they won't work, because they were not meant to work. Back during the time of Shaliach Shaul, and then the importance of the Pacific as the starting point of these yet kingdom to come teachings, we understand what governed back then was trade, being reliable, being trustworthy, do not cheat, do not lie. And they used these during the time of their trade, and they were very prosperous. Later on, during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, then the enemy decided to go towards the west and placing people in charge that never had enough knowledge of trade. That's why we today are bankrupt. So then, governments won't be able to fix a nation. You can be sure of it. Only the traders, those people who are involved with the trade, freighters, merchants, these are going to have power and ability of shaping up what it used to be. And governments are simply placed aside. So then, what is the link of the merchants and then these people involved with the trade, and then the sons of Ishmael and Chinese? And we are then expecting in a very short while a system, a monetary system via online, a system of investments, a system of very high productivity, where then people, they no longer have to be dependent upon a system of a government. Each person is able then to contribute as a member of a government, yet the name is not a government. The understanding is a person governs himself or herself using a very precise system via computer. And the freighters of the earth, those merchants making the most strong decisions, and governments doing what they want. That's how it's going to be, liking it or not. So then, let's evaluate once more the importance of reading precisely what the prophet said. He's explaining. Then we can understand crowning as the turbans, and the turbans of then these people, these merchants, are chiefs, host traders, and then they are very weighty. Weighty simply means the importance or the weight of the word. Explaining then the merchants are then the people with power, as we find these in the 8th chapter of Revelation. And from later chapters, you'll find roughly in the 20th chapter, you find the freighters of the earth, the merchants of the earth. Those people, they have the power of making decisions. And governments are aside. The governments simply do what the freighters want, or they are fired. It's very simple. So then, the shaping up of a nation comes from the understanding of the freighters making decisions. As the monetary systems are changing, as the virtual monetary systems are more popular, as then people are adopting virtual monetary systems for their living, then they unglue, in quote, unglue themselves from central banks, the absolute destruction of a nation, and they purchase monetary systems via online where there is no inflation, and they can have more for what they work for. thus providing then a glimpse how then the freighters or the merchants are going to receive power. I have to go any further so you can link yourself with these understandings. So then, later on we're going to study these plus then the covenant. It was promised before regarding then Daniel the 11th chapter and the covenant. The real covenant and the false covenant, or the abomination that makes desolate. We shall study these, because as the merchants are then coming to the scenario, then we understand why the covenant should be on stage at this point. But you can be sure of it, no nation in this planet, depending upon governments, will work. The freighters are truly lining up themselves for this authority. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.